Hello everyone, I hope you're doing well. In the last video, we took some stock footage and we rotoscoped the actor out of the background, as well as tracking the camera of the shot so that we may import the camera movements into another software. In this video, we are going to take our rotoscoped actor and our tracked camera export, and we are going to bring them into Unreal Engine 5 so that we may render out a new background for our shot. So before getting started, I recommend going to Unreal's Marketplace and looking for the Mannequins pack by Epic Games and adding it to your project. These mannequins are sized to the scale of an average human, so they'll be a big help when we are adjusting our camera. So once you've acquired the pack, you can go to your library and search for it here, and then you can add it to your project like so. For today, I'm going to be reusing the environment that I made in my environment building in Unreal video. And before we dig into it, there are two plugins that we need to make sure are enabled for this project. So to access our plugins, go to Edit and go down to Plugins. And from here, we need to search for Cinema 4D Importer. We make sure that is checked. And then we need to search for Image Plate. Make sure that is checked. And this is a beta feature, so this little pop-up might appear, but you can go ahead and ignore that and move on. And then once those two are checked, we will need to restart Unreal Engine. And now we'll be able to import that camera we just made in After Effects, as well as display the image sequence in our scene that we created of our actor. So let's start with our camera. To do that, we will go to here and go to Datasmith. Select File Import. And then find the folder where you saved your Cinema 4D camera export, and then open your camera. And just go ahead and hit OK. It'll add it to your content. I saved my camera as Cowboy Camera, so the folder that gets created will go under the same name. And from there, navigate to Animations. And in there, you'll find a brand new level sequence, also named after your camera. So go ahead and double click back to open it up. And then tap the camera icon to lock it to your viewport. And there is our camera motion. Now, it is not perfect. Unfortunately, going straight from After Effects to Unreal, there's no way for Unreal to know how large the camera is actually supposed to be. So we're going to have to kind of eyeball it. Additionally, it looks like the camera angle is pointing a little more downwards than it was in the original footage, so we'll need to fix that as well. Real quick, I'm going to go into two-panel mode by going up here, and then to Layouts, and this template right here. Next, I'm going to find this camera in my outliner, and then press F in the viewport to find it. Next, I want to be able to manipulate my camera so that I can scale it down, making the movement smaller and more in line with the original footage. However, I don't want to scale the camera directly. Instead, I want to manipulate the parent object. That is because the camera object has keyframes on every frame. So if I wanted to make changes on the camera object directly, I would have to make that change on every frame. However, if I were to transform the parent object, those changes will be passed along to the camera actor, and it won't matter what frame it's on. And it helps to be able to have one of the cameras locked in my panel. So I'm going to press this camera icon here to pilot the camera in one of my panels. And because every frame is keyframed, I won't need to worry about making any accidental changes so long as auto keyframe is turned off. So with the camera's parent object selected, I'm going to start moving it into a position I like, and I'm going to start manipulating the scale. Careful when trying to scale it, however, because sometimes you may end up scaling it larger rather than smaller. And if you're struggling to scale it from the panels, you may want to scale it from the details panel instead. All right, that looks a bit too small. So I'll raise the scale again. That looks a bit more in line. In my original shot, the camera seemed to be facing upwards and moving back in a straight line. So I'm going to adjust this to try and recreate that. If you're not able to tilt your camera straight back, it likely means that you are in world rotations. As a reminder, you can toggle between world and local rotations by using this button up here. And that looks pretty accurate to the scene now. Next up, I wanted to bring in something to help me get that size to feel a little more accurate. So I'm going to add in the mannequin that we downloaded earlier. So I'm going to go to Control Rig, Characters, Mannequins, Meshes. I'm going to grab the skeletal mesh title. It's SKM_Manny. And now with this mannequin in the scene, I can use them to estimate what the scale of my entire scene is. So I go ahead and place this mannequin in my frame approximately where the cowboy started in the original shot. He looks a little small, and the camera movement is pretty big, so I think I need to scale my camera down now. I'm going to find my camera's parent object. We're just going to scale that down. It doesn't need to be 100% perfect for this project. We just want to get our feet wet with this exercise. Next, let's go ahead and add in an image plate, which we can parent to our camera so that we can display the actor in front of our camera. So I'm going to click this button, and then I'm going to start typing to search for the image plate. So I'm just going to type an image and select image plate from there, and it puts an image plate into our scene. Pull that out. And then from my outliner, I'm going to drag that over my camera. And I'm going to go ahead and click this arrow to reset the rotations on my image plate to 0. Now, since it's parented to the camera, the rotations are all going to be in relation to that camera. So now the image plane is actually going to face the camera. And because our camera has been scaled down to be super tiny, we'll need to make an adjustment to make the image plate larger. So in your DSL's panel, go down to Fill Screen Amount. And right now it's at 100, but we need to overcompensate for the size of our camera itself. So just keep scaling that up until it matches the size of your piloted viewport. Next up, we're going to go to our content browser. And you can just go ahead and go to your content folder at the top. And we're going to be adding some new files to the project here. Normally, you'd maybe want to make some new folders for these, but this is such a small project that making the content folder will be fine for now. Just go ahead and right click, and then we're going to go up to Media, Media Player. Make sure that this is checked, and hit OK. And we just call this Media Actor Media Player. Next, go ahead and right click in your content browser again to create a new material right there. We can call this image sequence material. And actually, I like to put an M_ prefix before all my materials. Go ahead and double click that. And here, this opens up the material editor. Now, this works a lot like the Hypershade in Maya, so it should feel familiar in the sense that it is another node-based material editor. And in here, we're going to grab the media texture that was created when we made our media player, and we're going to drag it into the material editor. And what it's done is that it's created a texture sample, which is a node we can use to link an image into our material. Now from here, let's go ahead and select the node that makes up our material. Just like Maya, it takes in inputs like base color, or metallic, or specular, or roughness, and combines them into a single material, which you can assign to different objects in your project. So make sure you have the base node selected. And over here on the left, we have a details panel, which houses various settings for our material. It's a lot to dig into, and so you don't need to worry about this whole thing. All we need to worry about for now is changing our blend mode from opaque to masked. And that will allow us to have the transparency from our image sequence of our actor translate into a mask on the material. Then we need to go to shading model to change this from default lit to unlit, which basically means it will not take in lighting data. So we don't have to worry about it being too dark or too bright based on what's around it in the scene. And then we need to check two-sided so that our material will display the same on both the front side and the back side of our image plate. Then with our texture sample, go ahead and drag the A channel, which stands for alpha, into opacity mask, and then drag the RGB, which is our color channels, into emissive color, which is essentially the color that this material will glow. Given that we set our material to unlit, this is the only option to color our material. And from there, our material is set up. And so we can go ahead and go up to here to save it. And then we can just close this window. Next up, we're going to right-click in our content browser again to make a new file. And this time we are going to go to Media, Image Media Source. And I'm just going to name this Image Media Source. I'm going to double click it. And this is what will allow us to connect our image sequence into our project. Now, we don't want to actually have our image sequence in our Unreal project directly, only because it'll make a bunch of .u asset files that we don't really need. So instead, all we need to do is use the image media source, and we can go down to sequence path, click the three dots here, and then navigate to the folder containing the image sequence of a rotoscoped actor. Select the first file, and then go to advanced. And under frame rate override, you have the option to set the frame rate interpretation of this image sequence. Mine was 30 frames per second, so I'm going to select 30. And then I'm going to hit save and close this window. And now it's time to put it all together. So go ahead and go to your actor media player and double click it. And then just double click your input media source. And so now that image sequence is assigned to your media player. And go ahead and hit save. Close that out. Next, go ahead and go to your image plate. And then in your details panel, under image plate right here, go down to advanced. And you'll see there's a slot where you can put a new material. Go ahead and go to your image sequence material and drag that onto there. Then finally go to your sequencer and go ahead and select track, media track. And that allows us to add a media track to our sequencer. And then within the newly created media row, press the plus sign, go to media source, and add image media source. And then just go ahead and extend this out to the length of your scene. And then right-click the media in the sequencer and go to edit selection. And under media texture, go ahead and find your media texture. And then just like that, we have our actor in the scene. I wouldn't necessarily use this as my final compositing because I'm going to want to go back into After Effects to do some rotoscope touch-ups. But for the purposes of setting up the cameras and making adjustments to our scene, this is excellent to have. So now with my cowboy in the shot, I can compare him to the scale of the mannequin to try to better get an idea of what the scale is supposed to be and where I want to position my camera. Keep in mind, if you change the scale of your camera's parent object after you've brought in your image plate, that change in scale will be sent down the chain to your image plate as well. So you have to compensate by adjusting your fill screen amount. And also perhaps the distance of your image plate from your camera. It's around here that I realized that the sun hitting my actor's face is a little bit different from the sun in my Unreal project. So I spent some time moving my camera around and trying out different angles to get the lighting to match up a bit better with my actor. This is really the benefit to doing all of this in Unreal, is that I can get very quick results with the real-time rendering. This allows me to experiment and try different things on the fly without having to wait for minutes or even hours to see the final results of my experimentation, as I would with a more traditional rendering engine like Maya's Arnold system. So now I'm pretty happy with where my camera is positioned. Next, I want to work with the aperture of my camera so that it feels a little bit more like a real camera. So I'm going to grab this mannequin here. I'm going to move it right about where he's at here. And I'm going to use the mannequin to eyedrop for my aperture settings. And select my 3D tracker camera. And then I'm going to go to manual focus distance. I'm going to click the eyedropper next to it. And then I'm going to click my mannequin to set that as my focus distance. I'm going to drop the aperture down. Go to my local translation and just move it back so it's right on where the mannequin is, so it's not getting blurred. And let's drop the focus distance a little closer, just because I want the effect to be noticeable. There we go. I think I'm pretty happy with that aperture. It's subtle, but it works. Now that I'm pretty happy with where my shot is at, I'm going to go ahead and render this footage out. But before I do that, I want to hide the image plate and the mannequin. The mannequin I can simply move out of the shot. Then to hide my image plate, I'm going to go to my details panel. And I'm just going to search for visibility. I'm going to check that off. Go to render. Go to settings and make sure that I'm rendering a PNG sequence. If this is not set up like that, remember you can go to settings and select PNG sequence from exports. And then just turn off your JPEG sequence. And just accept, hit render. And with that, we have a rendered background. If everything went well, you should have a background that matches up very closely with the camera movement of your original shot. And so when we take this back into After Effects, this should be a very clean composite when we put the two together. So with that, thank you for sticking through this long. I'll see you in the next part, and I hope you have a good one.